her little situation stop her from being part of our show today. So for those of you that follow Romane, you notice that she posted on her Facebook wall tonight's topic. And there was some interesting feedback. Let me just give you a little background. Romane and I have been talking about a show. And we're going to talk about the sugar daddy. And, a lot of us have, I guess, an image in our mind of what a sugar daddy is. What if that image is incorrect or inaccurate? We all think about the older gentleman, probably collecting Social Security, got a pension, his own home or whatever, children off, and, he just enjoys the company of a younger woman. But can you be a younger man and be a sugar daddy? Does it have to be, or is there a particular age requirement to be a sugar daddy? In fact, does it have to just be men? Because nowadays we use the term cougar to describe mature women who enjoy the company of younger men. So I'm sure many of our listeners, female listeners in particular, know some girlfriend of theirs or family member who's taking care of a man. Does that qualify her as being a sugar mama? So Romane is going to be joining us. We're going to pose these questions to her because, she has been doing some research into, I guess, the mentality of the sugar daddy. And, here's Romane now. Romane, we were just introducing the topic.
I'm sorry.
We were just introducing the topic. Did you hear the little introduction I gave?
No, I didn't. You have to fill me in.
Okay. So what I was saying was that we have a image in our head of what the sugar daddy is. The older gentleman, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be an older gentleman. There could be a young man who's a sugar daddy, right?
Absolutely.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a man. I mean, today we use the term cougar to describe mature women or older women who enjoy the company of younger men. And I guess it's just a reversal of roles, wouldn't you say?
I believe it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because for an older man, I guess there is a psychological aspect of it where the younger man is searching for that, I guess, proverbial fountain of youth and just enjoys the, I guess, the energy of a younger woman, right? I guess it takes him back to that time of his life, his youth, when I guess he had it going on. And, for all of us, males and females, as we go through the natural progression, the aging process, I mean, let's be realistic. We can't do the things we did 30 years ago. You know what I mean? I guess if you keep yourself in optimal shape, you can do some of the things, but you're not going to be able to do all of them. We're not as flexible as we used to be. Things don't heal as fast. When you're a younger person, you don't have a care in the world. When you become a mature person, well, things are at stake. You know what I mean? You have families, you have a job or a home, things of that nature. So you're not going to go out and be as reckless as you might have been when you were younger. So I guess just the energy and the excitement of a younger woman, I guess it's an ego thing as well for both men and women. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I think that initially, before I did some reading, I think I shared in that viewpoint that a lot of it was ego and physical, and then as I started to read what relationship experts and relationship counselors and therapists had to say about it, and it looked like it was a consensus, and that they believed that it wasn't as black and white as we think it is, that it's really something that needs to be titled as complicated. It looks like men aren't really interested in younger women solely for the purpose of physical attraction or for that trophy, right? That they're actually attracted to younger women because younger women kind of admire them. So, somebody my age, in their 50s, we'll just leave it at in their 50s. We won't give the exact age. But somebody in their 50s, a woman, meets a man in her 50s, she may not be as impressed with him.
Mm-hmm.
She may be her socioeconomic position may be on par with his, or may have exceeded his, right? So, but a 30-year-old, she may really be impressed with, his socioeconomic status, his maturity, his level of responsibility, how he's put together, and somebody my age may not be. So to a man in his 50s, that probably feels really good. Would that feel good to you, Warren?
A woman in her 30s, you mean? Or
a woman in her 30s that just admires you.
Actually, no. And I'll tell you why. If I was single, right, and was looking for someone, I would be looking for someone closer to my own age. And for a variety of reasons. I need to have someone I can relate to, right? That, we share some experience or some experiences in common. Also, I'm not interested in having children at this stage of my life. And for younger people, for a younger woman, she may not have children of her own and may want that, may want the experience of being a mother. And I'm just not there. When you get to be in your 50s, you don't really have the energy to chase the child around the house and potty training, all of the stuff that goes with being a parent. At this stage of the game, you're thinking about, I guess, your golden years and traveling and exploring and, enjoying the rest of your days. With a younger person, I guess they just have a different perspective on life. So no, that wouldn't do it for me.
And actually, one of the major reasons for breakup in these relationships like this has to do with children, because most people in our age group, we've already had children, and if we haven't, by the time we're in our 50s, we aren't as consumed with the thought of childbearing, right?
Right.
But for someone in their 30s, initially, I think when they get involved in these relationships, they don't think about that. And then as the relationship grows, I guess they decide that, I want to have children. And the men aren't so willing to have children. They're just not interested. It's like you said, and when you get to your 50s, you're planning retirement. You're planning, how you're going to travel, and maybe, thinking about downsizing where children require you to still be in their home, So, but that same research and those same counselors and therapists, they say that that's one of the reasons why this dynamic doesn't work.
Well, something, I think that most people, when they look at what used to be called a May-December romance, they think of it almost entirely as being physical. I know I do. I look at somebody, a man in his, 60s, 70s, with a woman, late 20s, early 30s. And, the question comes up like, well, what does he think he's doing? Who's he kidding? right? You know, this woman is approaching her sexual peak. I think they said women peak around their 40s, right? Whereas he, of course, is in a state of decline physically. Now, that doesn't apply to everybody. You know, like I said before, if you're in optimal health, you take care of yourself. Well, I mean, you know, you might be able to keep up with her, right, for lack of a better term. But for most of us, we're not spending that time, you know, going to the gym, hours in the gym, you know, keeping ourselves in optimal shape. You know, we're not eating right. We're not, the American diet is not conducive to aging, the age process or the aging process. So we think of it as terms of, you know, just a physical relationship. A young man sees a young woman, you know, a woman who is younger and, of course, more supple and everything else, right, as opposed to women his own age. So there's that physical attraction. And, you know, I remember back in the 80s, you know, guys older than my father, who my father was probably in his 50s during that time, you know, these guys would run into the neighborhood beauty parlor getting jerry curls, right? And, you know, I guess they figure, well, young women, they want to be able to play in your hair. I don't know how much playing you're going to do with all that jerry curl juice, but, you know, they wanted that youthful appearance, and they thought it would attract these younger women to them. I think there's a lot of psychological stuff going on when you are altering your appearance. It's not just about the younger woman. It's also about yourself. You're not being completely happy with yourself. And that may be part of, I guess, this whole equation, not feeling happy with yourself on some level and going after a younger woman. I mean, is that what the experts are saying?
Well, what they are saying is that these are all the things that we think are the reason. Now, are there a group of older men who are dating younger women because they don't feel good about themselves? I would imagine so. What they did say was actually very valid data, was that a lot of these men have been through traumatic divorces. So I would imagine that probably they aren't feeling good about themselves, or either they feel like they have a point to prove, because studies show that usually in instances of divorce, right, that women are usually the initiators of divorce. I think the numbers are somewhere like 80% of divorces or something like that.
80%?
So I would imagine, yeah. So I would imagine that men coming out of bad or ugly divorces, maybe they just want to know that they still have it? Maybe that's what it is.
You know, that's a good question, you know, because I would think that after being married, possibly for some time, years, and going through a messy divorce, I don't know if I would be inclined to go out and even get into any sort of, I guess, lasting or committed relationship. I mean, I would have a fear of having to go through another divorce. I think that would be in the back of my mind, most certainly. Yeah, we all want to feel attractive to the opposite sex or to the same sex if you're so inclined. And I guess for an older gentleman to have a young woman who clearly is impressed by him, and I think what it is for a lot of women, I guess in their 20s, 30s, even I guess their 40s, a lot of the men in their age group might not have it together. And I'm talking on an economic level, on an intellectual level, on a spiritual level. So for women who are looking for a relationship, it's difficult when the guys aren't bringing anything to the table. And then you see this older gentleman who, knows how to speak to a lady. He comes across as a gentleman, treats her with respect, something she may not get from guys, within her age group. And then, for this older gentleman, well, he may have a pension, may have Social Security, may own a home, businesses, he's financially secure, whereas some of these guys her age may be struggling, trying to find themselves in the world. So, I could see the older man saying, well, she's showing some interest in me. How far should we go with this? Do you seek a full-fledged relationship? And all that comes with it. Again, this woman may not have children and may be looking for someone that she feels provides the security blanket. And I'm not talking economic, but in so many ways, that level of comfort where she says, okay, I'm ready to settle down and have a child. I want to be a mother. So for that older gentleman, it's a decision to be made there. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think a lot of things that you're saying is valid, and I'm also like watching the responses from viewers. I'm trying to have them get involved in the conversation, and I'm actually reading one person's comment that says she can't speak from a sugar daddy's perspective, but she dated men in their 50s, and this is a younger woman. She dated men in her 50s because they were done raising their children. They were mature, and she felt like they treated her like a lady. Mm-hmm. And she also said they were more straightforward. So, and what she's saying actually lines up with what I read that these counselors say, which is some of the reasons why younger women are so attractive or impressed. They're impressed with older men is because they say that there's a certain level of maturity. The older men seem to be more responsible. They're interested in more than just sex. They have more concern with how a woman feels, and maybe just the younger guys, right? They just haven't reached that point in life yet where they aren't self-centered. Maybe the younger population is a little self-centered. That takes some maturity, but it looks like younger women are initially attracted to the stability and responsibility and the attention that they get from older men. Unfortunately, these same studies and all of this research shows us that these relationships don't last.
Well, I would imagine not, and for a number of reasons. Probably children is a big issue. If you are a man in your 50s and your children are grown and out of the house and are supporting themselves and you have grandchildren, are you willing or do you have the desire to start a family? And if you're dealing with a younger woman and she has younger children, are you willing to take on the responsibility of being a surrogate father? That's an issue for men in general, but for an older man who's raised his children, who, have seen them leave home and go out into the world, hopefully successfully, to start all over again, that's a tough one. And I guess from a younger woman's perspective, as I said, women reaching their sexual peak in, their 40s, and you're dealing with a man who, after a few years together, this man is 60, he's in that state of decline. There's got to be some incompatibility there, and just in terms of having discussions. So I'll give you an example. Last night, I went to the store, and while I was in the store, in walks a celebrity. The gentleman's name is Chaz Palminteri. He was the writer of Bronx Tale. He's been in 70 different movies. So I recognized him right away. There were two young women behind the counter, and I'm trying to explain who he is. And, the first movie that came to mind was A Bronx Tale. And they're like, well, we're not familiar with that. So sometimes you have that generational gap where you're not relating to one another, because, well, I'm from a different era. The music is different. Society was different. How we looked at ourselves and how the world looked at us was different. Today, there's got to be some challenges there trying to relate to one another. Do we like the same thing? Do we enjoy the same activities? Right? What is it we're going to have in common that's going to keep our relationship together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so,
That's
go ahead.
No, that's on that list as well. That's one of the other reasons why the relationships they don't have longevity is because the couple, they can't relate to any history. They just from two different eras.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a question for you. So now, would you consider dating an older gentleman? And when I say older, let's say somebody 65 to 70 years of age. Would you even consider it?
I'll get you later, Ron. I'll get you later. I think that, let me just start off by saying, I am a woman who, in my history, I've always been attracted to older men. I've been married twice, and both times my husband is older than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, as we get older, the desire to start to close that margin that separates the two of us chronologically, you want to start to close that margin, because the difference is in a woman, because we mature faster, right? So the difference in a woman who is 30, who is dating somebody who's 40, it doesn't seem like there's such a big difference, right?
Right.
But then she is 40 and he's 50. Now the dynamic is shifting a little bit. And then when she's 50 and he's 60, now she's just qualifying for her AARP, and he's crossing over to Social Security, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when she's 60 and he's 70, it just, the difference becomes more severe, I think, with every decade. So even if you've been attracted to older men your whole life, I think as you start to get older, that margin, start to close that margin a little bit, because the difference is just so great. There's a big difference between a man that's 55 and 60.
Right.
And I'm sure it's a lot of men that would want to challenge me on that and say, I beg to differ. But unless he's like in optimal health and optimal shape, there's a big difference in 55 and 65.
Yeah, I would say so.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I would say so. And I think that for a woman, a younger woman who was going to take on or enter into a relationship with a gentleman who's a senior citizen, well, yeah, I think senior citizens still considered 65, right? Somewhere around there. So if you're going to be in a relationship with somebody who is at that age or rapidly approaching that age, I think that for a woman, you have to look at it, you're taking on an added responsibility. What if he's not in the best of health? Or after you enter into a relationship, his health begins to decline. And now you find yourself not just a companion, not just a lover, but now you're a nurse, having to care for this gentleman. And I guess, it works both ways, because you might find a young man in a relationship with an older woman, and she may begin to have some health issues, and he might find himself in a position where he needs to be her, well, at least her health advocate. Take care of her and see to it that she's getting proper health care. I mean, those are all considerations when you enter into a relationship with someone older. I mean, I would think.
But you know what? I think that you guys, and this is why I don't understand why it's looked at so differently when it's an older woman with a younger man versus an older man with a younger woman, because they look upon the women more harshly, like, oh my God, she's with this young guy. But really, when you look at it in all actuality, right? Women, when they're like, first of all, you already covered the thing with women reaching their sexual peak in their 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then in addition to that, a woman that's in her 50s, right, that she's empty nest, so she's an empty nester, right? And she's at an age where 9 times out of 10, she's rediscovering herself, right? She's rediscovering herself. She finally doesn't have to worry about the kids being home and, doing all those mom, they transition from mommy to mom to having this opportunity to re-emerge, right? Versus the men who by the time they reach that age, they're tired. I'm sorry, guys, but they're tired. So you don't really see the men going at the same pace that you see women going at in their 50s. So, and you're like, no disrespect to the guys, but I mean, this is just what happens with women. Women, they turn 50, they going out, they doing all kinds of new things, new hairdos, new looks, they want to start to travel with their girlfriends, what was that movie? How Stella got her groove back?
Right.
Right? So she was rediscovering herself. Right? So I think that all those things play in. And could it be either one who could end up being a caregiver or a quote unquote nurse? It could be either one. But I'm gonna tell you, we have to stop, looking at women so differently and charging them so more harshly when they decide to assume that what is the social word they're using now? The word that they come up with socially, the cougar role.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they made it okay for men. Men can be 60 and have a girlfriend that's 25.
Right.
But if a woman goes and a woman gets a man that's 10 years her junior, everybody's side-eyeing her. Why?
That's a good question. And I guess the simple answer is throughout history, men have written rules, right? So, men have basically dictated what is acceptable. So, of course, men who write the rules are going to make it acceptable for them to be with a young woman. Let's be realistic. In some countries, not so much here anymore, but in some countries, you have men, in their 50s marrying girls that are preteens, very young girls. I guess it is the custom and the tradition. Here it would be looked upon, or not only as a criminal, That would be looked upon as being unacceptable. But in other cultures, it happens every day. You know, in some of these poor countries, people have large families and they're like, well, I can't feed all of you. So, you know, my 11-year-old daughter, I'm going to give, you know, to Mr. John down the road who's got grandchildren as old as my daughter. But, you know, that removes at least a portion of the burden off me. Now he has to provide for her. You know, it's certainly not ideal, but it is reality in a lot of places. You know, so in this country, you know, men have written the rules here as well. So it is men who determine, you know, things like what is it acceptable for an older woman to be with a younger man. You know, I mean, nowadays there's a fight for Roe v. Wade. Who's debating? Who's holding these debates? It's predominantly men who are going to determine if a woman should have a child or not. You know, there's very few women who are part of this debate. This goes back to 1973. In 73, how many women were in Congress? You know, Shirley Chisholm and a handful of others. But, you know, men were debating making these decisions. So, of course, they're going to make it favorable for them. Is it right? No. I mean, let's be fair. It's not right. And, you know, realistically, there's no real rules to who you should love. You know, if you're attracted to an older woman or an older man and you can bridge that gap, then why not? You know, people are going to may frown on it because they look at it from the outside. They say, well, if it's an older man with a younger woman, she's in it for money. Not necessarily. Older man, younger woman, well, he's in it because he's trying to get a thrill. Not necessarily. You know, we're only speculating, looking at it from the outside looking in. We don't know. We really don't know. I just think that in some cases, it is an ego trip for, I would say men in particular. It's a bit of an ego trip. I think that men in certain positions of authority, they want to have eye candy. You know, they need and crave that attention. And if having a younger woman, a young attractive woman on their arm is going to bring them that attention that they crave, then yeah, they'll do it. You know, I mean, off the top of my head, you know, who comes to mind, of course, Donald Trump, right? Most of the women that he gets involved with are younger women. You know, I mean, his wife, Melania, is probably, I don't know, 20 years his junior. But, you know.
She's his son's age. Don Jr.'s age.
Okay, so Terry said he's Don Jr.'s age, right? So, you know, you have a huge gap there. And not only is there the gap in age, is cultural gaps. You know what I mean? She's from Eastern Europe. There's language barriers. But, you know, I guess it's just attention. And I don't want to just single out Donald Trump. There are other men who have younger women, men in positions of authority, who crave that attention and have to have it. And if having this woman who's going to be your conversation piece, well, you know, they're willing to do that. I think for women, it's a little bit different. I think that, and of course, I can't speak to that on an emotional level, but I think women kind of have a different level of attachment. I mean, yeah, there's the eye candy as well, but I think it's maybe a little bit deeper. What do you think?
Well, what I'm wondering is if it has, do you think that it has anything to do with, since you're saying that the men they like the eye candy, they like having a younger woman, they like one is on, they like the attention, they like the admiration, they like all these things, which to me kind of makes me wonder if it has anything to do with like midlife crisis. like life review. You get to, in psychology, we talk about how people, when they get to midlife, one of the indicators is that people start to do what's called a life review. And you start to look and say, almost like the shoulda, woulda, coulda, have I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish, stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe it has something, maybe you think it has something to do with midlife crisis?
I don't know. I think that if you lived somewhat of a full life, you can look back and say, well, you know what? I took advantage of my opportunities. I've done pretty much what I've sought to accomplish in life. Do I need to have this younger woman at this stage of the game? What am I trying to prove to anyone at this point in my life? I guess for some men, there may be some level of insecurity. For others, maybe they didn't date very much when they were younger. Maybe they had difficulty communicating with women. Now, from a man's perspective, right, I know women say that men are difficult to figure out. Well, take it from me, y'all are difficult to figure out, right? A lot of guys don't know what to say. You know what I mean? And for a man, there's a dynamic when you go to meet a woman, particularly if she's out with her girlfriends. Now, if you have a woman, let's say there's 5 ladies, and they decide to go out. Well, man sees one of the members of the group and wants to approach her. Well, there's always one in that group that is a confirmed hater. Oh, girl, don't talk to him. Right? Always going to be one. Then you're going to have the other one who's just never happy. Let's go. As soon as you get there and you're beginning to have a good time, she, for whatever reason, isn't getting enough attention or the vibe isn't right. She's ready to go. Right? So for a man trying to say to you, to talk to you, well, it's like you have an offensive line, right? Oh, girl, check him out, but he won't, right? So it's difficult. Guys, on the other hand, if a woman wants to approach a guy, you don't have to worry about these other guys. Don't sit there and say, man, don't talk to her. Get out the way, bro. You know what I mean? So it's difficult. And a lot of guys have, a problem navigating those waters. So they become insecure and they don't talk to a lot of women. You know what I mean? They don't have the gift of gab. So maybe as they get older, right, and become more successful, I guess it builds their confidence so they can go out, right? Especially if you've been successful and you have money, right? You feel now, well, I'm confident now. Women may not like my conversation, but they'll certainly like the fact that I'm picking them up in a Maybach. I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah, you're right, Ron. And then I'm just, again, I'm so happy. This was the plus side to me having to be home away from my COVID test, was me being able to watch these comments on Facebook, which is awesome because normally it's kind of difficult to do both. But I'm just looking at the comments and somebody is saying, Wanda is saying that I personally know someone who only dated younger women, and he ran through these women. He studied them and he learned their habits and then purposed himself to accommodate them. But they had no idea that it was just until he moved on to the next victim. So, does that have something to do with this whole dynamic? Is the etiology behind older men liking younger women? Can he manipulate them? Is it easier for him to do what he wants to do with a younger woman? I mean, which would really point back to what you say too, because I believe men who do that is really because they have all these insecurities themselves. But do you think that those insecurities, the ones you spoke about in his younger years, not being so suave, right?
Mhm.
And then he gets into his older years, and now he thinks he's mastered it a little bit, but only with younger women.
You know,
Right? He can't run that same thing on older women.
well, that could be part of it. But there's a term women use to describe men, right? And that's the four-legged type, right? And let's be realistic. You have older guys that are still out there barking, still covered in fleas, right? That are taking what they did in their youth and they're still doing it, right? You know, there's a reality that we all have to accept. You're never going to please everybody. And some folks are not going to be pleased in a monogamous relationship. It's just not who they are. So even though this person is older, monogamy may just not be their thing. Everybody's not cut out to settle down and have a wife, a children, a house with the white picket fence, and a dog, right? Some people want to continue to play the field until they're laid to rest. And look, I'm sure I know some, I'm sure you know some. You would think as you get older, well, you would slow down. Well, they may not run or walk as fast, but they might be on that walker getting down behind the system. You know what I mean? So, it may be all part of it.
I agree, and I think that you're so right. I think that that's a whole nother topic, in our community, this whole monogamy thing. I have people in my family that have been laughing at me because I'm always reading and studying about different subcultures and stuff like that kind of intrigues me. And one of the hot topics these days in our culture is polyamory, polygamy, and so I guess those are the people who you talk about who have decided that monogamy is not for them, right? Which I think it's okay for us to say whatever floats your boat is okay. I mean, you reach a point in your life where you say, you know what, I'm not here to be the judge and jury over people's life, choices and decisions, the choices and decisions that they make. As long as everybody's being open, honest, and upfront with one another. Where I would have a problem is if these younger men, like Wanda said, are out and they really preying on, and not all of them, because Terry said that, not all men are dogs, and that's the truth. No, not all men are dogs. But the ones who are out and they are preying on younger women, because I don't even consider them younger women. I look at them like young girls. They're preying on these young girls in their 20s who haven't even figured life out at all. And I think that one of the things they like is that those young girls are more fluid. It's easier for them to I hate to say it, build a woman. Can you build a woman?
Yeah, you can. And you know something? What you just said, right? In listening to your comments, one name popped into my head, and that is Robert Sylvester Kelly, right? Otherwise known as R. Kelly. Now let's be realistic. R. Kelly is in his 50s now? I think he's somewhere around 54. And R. Kelly was involved with women in junior high and high school, right? There's something, R. Kelly is a conversation in and of itself because there's a pathology going on there. R. Kelly has what I would, and I'm not an expert, I'm no psychologist or psychiatrist, but from the outside looking in, R. Kelly has almost a hatred of women. I mean, years ago, he made a video and he's seen urinating on a young girl. So who does that to somebody that you have respect for, that you admire, that you care for? I mean, yes, as adults, people have all kind of what we would consider kinky sex. Well, if it works for you, that's fine. But this is not something this girl was consenting to. So, yeah, I think that younger women are impressed by things. He shows up, big expensive car, he's iced out, he's got a name, everybody knows him. But unfortunately, we are at that hour, right? It has gone by so quickly. So I guess maybe we need to revisit this, and maybe we can get into more of the pathology.
Got another 10 minutes.
More of the pathology of somebody like an R. Kelly, right? I mean, for most of the men we're talking about, these older gentlemen, some of them are just out because the younger woman's form is more appealing to them. You know what I mean? I mean, let's be realistic. As you get older, gravity is going to have its effect on certain parts of the anatomy, right? So older guys might be, well, you know what? I want a younger woman, right? I just like the way they feel. Okay. If that's your thing, all right. And for women, listen, you got these young guys that in the gym working out, right? They're put together. I mean, you might be with somebody your own age and they might not be, what's the word I'm looking for? They might not be accomplishing what needs to be accomplished in the bedroom. So younger man comes along and he's showing you some attention. It's like, I mean, I'm reaching my sexual peak or I'm there, and my significant other is way past, didn't take care of himself properly in his youth, right? And now, he gets in the bed and goes right to sleep, watch the news, and it's a wrap, So that is an issue that, many people, many women, and men are going to have. So I guess, we'll have to, like I said, dig a little deeper, because all of us are looking at this from the outside looking in. We all have our preconceived notions. You see an older man with a young woman, you're like, yeah, all he doing is passing off. Right? What is he doing with this woman? Ain't that much Viagra produced in the world, right? But that's us looking in from the outside. We really don't know the bond that they have. Sometimes it's not just about sex, but in our society, we think in terms of physical first. Emotional, psychological comes later. But everything is on a physical plane first. Would you agree with that?
I do. And I think that it's true about us assuming that everything is physical, right? But there's definitely some manipulation and stuff that could possibly be taking place and maybe what they are attracted to, right? Because that even happened. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and we went from this topic to us going into talking about the manipulation that takes place with the whole prostitution and pimp dynamic, right? And the manipulation that's used there with how his mindset is that he convinces her that they're doing it together.
Right.
So again, they can only do that to vulnerable women, right? So my question is that the same, is it the same technique? Like, do we look at that like it's just the same technique that's being used, the manipulation? Because these counselors and therapists that work with these couples, they say that eventually these couples find themselves in therapy because initially they admire the older man, and initially the older man is smitten with the younger woman, but then someplace in the relationship it turns into resentment. Someplace in the relationship, these younger women come into therapy announcing that he took advantage of me. He lied to me. He's not who I thought he was. So what happened? And people want to say, oh, sometime it works out. Sometimes it works out, but more often than not, it doesn't work out. And so you have therapists that work with primarily this population of couples, and it's like a consensus. This is the stuff that they come into therapy saying, the younger woman. And then the older man comes in saying she's never satisfied. I don't know what she wants from me. She's never satisfied. So what changes? Did the manipulation stop and then she woke up, or did she wake up in the middle of the manipulation? Like, what happened?
You said a whole lot, and there's many issues that I would have to kind of pick and choose from. But when you talk about the pimp dynamic as opposed to, just the older man, it is a matter of, in my mind, it is a matter of where your head is. It's a psychological thing. One trait that all predatory animals have in common is forward-facing eyes. Animals that are prey have eyes on the side of their head so they can watch almost 360 degrees. Predatory animals have their eyes facing forward so they can narrow in on their target. Where human beings have forward-facing eyes, right? We are predatory animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
How you develop psychologically determines how you will react or treat other human beings. If you develop that predatory side, then yes, you will take advantage of people. Yes, you will be the pimp. You will be the guy that goes out and snatches young women off the street. And what is the term they use nowadays? When you take these women these young girls off the street. Sex trafficking.
Oh,
right. The sex trafficker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You will become that unless you develop yourself and separate yourself from that predatory nature, right? But a lot of us don't. We take advantage, or we see an advantage in using one another. And that's what happens with the pimp. And sometimes it's also what happens with this older gentleman whose intentions are not the best. So, Terry was graceful enough to give us a few minutes, but, time flies. And unfortunately, it's just when things start to get really, really good is when you have to end it, But I'm just hoping that we can get together in studio next week and we can maybe delve into some of these issues. And, I've talked about R. Kelly before, but I never really thought about it in terms of older man, younger woman. But yeah, he fits the bill. So maybe that's something we can look at next week. And, I guess, during the week when we talk, maybe we can put up a topic on Facebook so that people are aware, because it's important that people be aware of, when we're here, what we're talking about, and that they continue to tune in and support Gynesis Radio. So, Romane, it was a pleasure to have you on. I'm wishing you a speedy recovery, and that this test will come back negative, and we'll see you here next week. So
yes, I'm looking forward to next week. I missed you guys this week.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So, for those folks who are listening and joining us from wherever you are, on behalf of Romane and myself, thank you for listening. And good night.
Good night, guys. Don't forget to look out for the surveys on Facebook so you can participate in what goes on. Good
Okay.
night, guys.
Good night.